All right, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from in the world. Thank you. We're happy to have you here. This is our Ask the Expert session on what hopefully you just watched the session of, which is about our Azure Active Directory vision and roadmap. I'm Adam Harbour. I am part of the Azure Active Directory product marketing team. We're going to have a handful of Azure Active Directory identity zero trust experts with you here today, and just a quick reminder on how to engage with the experts. So you all are on Teams live call here. We can't hear you. So what we'll need you to do is use the chat to ask questions. And then as we get those, we'll help manage and triage to you all, and then we'll be promoting those to you. If you see a question that we're asking that you really like, feel free to favorite, upvote it so that we can both know you're very interested in it and also that this is something you'd like to hear more about. And then since we've only got 30 minutes here, what we'll try to do is we have our experts on the call that will ask them some things live, and then we have an additional amount of experts offline that will be triaging and answering all your questions as chat as well. So we want to try to get to as many of your questions as possible. And then we're going to wrap up at the end. Please make sure to stay for the whole time. We'll have some best practice resources for you to click to next and kind of give you a perspective of what else you can visit here as part of Microsoft Ignite. Just a reminder of etiquette, the session may be recorded. Please don't spam or post inappropriate comments in the chat. Help us out. It's a lot of hard work to manage all these questions, so we appreciate it. And then please adhere to the Microsoft Code of Conduct, which I'm showing here. Let's all respect each other and have a great time at Microsoft Ignite. So with that, most importantly, let's meet the experts. So hopefully these folks are familiar to all of you. You just saw them in our Azure Active Directory roadmap session, or maybe you saw that earlier today. So we have Joey Cruz. He's a senior program manager. It's part of the identity team. He's on the customer and partner success and experience team. Specializes in Azure Active Directory Zero Trust. We have Bailey Bursick. She's also on the customer and partner success and experience team. She's a program manager, also well-versed in Azure AD and Zero Trust. We have Jasmine Bethauser. She's a senior program manager, and hopefully you heard in this session, she is our Azure AD app proxy expert. She had some pretty exciting news to share with you. I'd imagine we'll talk about that today. And then finally, last but not least, Melanie Maines, one of my peers on the product marketing team. She's a senior product marketing manager. She has a specialty across Azure AD, passwordless governance, but you definitely heard her today talk about decentralized identity. So we're very excited to get to that. So with that, please take a minute, go ahead, ask questions. We've got a couple from the last Ask the Experts that we'll get to. And I'm going to start with Melanie because we just covered decentralized identity at the end of that session. Verifiable credentials, really excited to hear about the future of identity. How are they different than really what we have today?
Hi, thanks everyone for joining us. So how are VCs different? Well, today, if you want to unshare the information that you have, think about all the places that you've logged into, that you've gone just in the last week or the last month. And being able to unshare that information is really difficult and sometimes impossible in some of these places. It's just not something that's that easy. And so we believe a decentralized identity system really gives users the ownership over their own data and who they share it with and for how long they can share it. So in this type of a model, individuals would also have one place to manage all of their verifiable credentials without having to go to multiple websites. So today, to get a verifiable credential, it's a W3C standard. The code is available today, and that's what we used for this pilot that we showed you. So you have to first create your decentralized identifier, and then you configure your credential, and then you're able to use it and share it at different places that accept it. So it's a great way to protect your privacy. It gives you the chance to take ownership. You can revoke your credentials at any time, like I mentioned. And at Microsoft, we have two of the largest cloud identity systems with the Microsoft accounts and the Azure Active Directory accounts. And so we truly believe that privacy is a human right, and we really hope to see decentralized identity as the next evolution of identity to make it easier and safer to exchange information online.
Awesome. Thank you, Melanie. The next question I'm going to ask is for Jasmine. So Jasmine, you shared some pretty exciting news, a feature that you've been tremendously hard at work at, Azure Active Directory header-based auth. So what's the big difference between the existing header-based auth support and the new support being added to App Proxy?
Yeah, awesome question. So we're really excited about this new functionality we're bringing because all of it is going to be native with Azure AD. So unlike our existing offering that we do have today that leverages a ping access integration, that one requires a couple extra components because you do need to install that ping access component to get that working, and as well as that additional configuration. So with this new functionality, everything is packaged into App Proxy. Your existing deployment that you have can start leveraging this new functionality as soon as it's out. So it's really meant to be a simplified way to connect your header-based auth apps, and we've done this because we've heard from a lot of our customers that this is really what they need. They need everything kind of consolidated and simplified so that they can, reduce their on-prem footprint.
Excellent, thank you. Next question for Bailey. Bailey, you're out there, feet on the ground, working with customers such as those that are listening to us today and helping them secure and improve their security posture via identity. One of the first features you talked about was really more of those user risk policy elements that we have within conditional access and identity protection. What are some ways that if someone's looking to get started, how would you recommend they should get started with a user risk policy?
Yeah, so if you're looking to get started with user risk policies, first of all, if you're looking for the easiest ways to get started with conditional access, definitely check out those new templates that I was demoing during the talk. But also with any sort of conditional access deployment, look at your current policies if you already have them to make sure that you have a good idea of what's already in play. Also, go on ahead and just whiteboard out all of the different users you have in your environment, the use cases that they have there, to ensure that you have everything locked down. And with user risk, that really plays into zero trust, which Joy touched on during the talk as well. And so being able to just constantly be checking your users and not just relying on, am I on or off the corporate network? So with user risk, as we mentioned during the talk, that is the probability that an account is compromised, and that can be a really powerful way to adjust your conditional access policies. So if you have users that are very privileged or users who are accessing sensitive data on the day-to-day basis, perhaps you want a conditional access policy that if they are high user risk, if their account is very likely to have been compromised, just blocking them from having access from everything. Or for those who are, your typical users in your environment, perhaps making them go through a password reset flow. So to summarize all of that, Adam, with exploring user risk and conditional access, ensure that you know your users and that you are applying the correct controls to them to give yourself the most security possible.
Beautiful. Perfect. Appreciate that. Thanks, Bailey. Next one, Joey, I think you're up. You showed us a little bit on those consent policies. Would a user always be prompted for consent when accessing a new app?
That's a great question. So it would really depend on what the admin has already pre-configured. One of the things a proactive measure an admin can take today is consenting for the entire organization. But you could also, one of the things that Jasmine showed during the demo was the ability to allow low impact approvals of permissions to consent for the organization. So depending on how the admin actually applies the controls, users typically don't have to go through that scene. The reason why we did it for our demo was to emphasize on the two different flows. One flow is frictionless for the user to able to consent because it was a low impact. And then the other flow, which is the admin consent flow, and that's because of the risky applications. So completely depends on the enterprise. We definitely highly recommend, if you haven't looked at your admin consent settings, we have a lot of great stuff coming inbound. So definitely look at tailoring it, making it frictionless so your end users are happier and less work for the admins for sure.
Perfect. All right, Jasmine, let's go back a little bit more to App Proxy. Are there any recommendations for how many connectors I should install for App Proxy or where connectors should be placed?
Yeah, so connectors are these lightweight agents that you install on-prem to get a proxy up and running, and that's really what acts as our connection point into your environment. They also only use outbound connections, so they're really meant to be this lightweight piece of software that runs on your environment. So the general recommendation is that you have at least 2 connectors per connector group, and this connector group can serve multiple applications, so that's no problem. But the reason we recommend 2 is so that you always have high availability. So in the case 1 is auto updating, we only auto update 1 at a time, and as well if there's some reason one of these connectors go down, you always have a second one there to take up the load. And it's even better if you can have 3 in the case you need to like maybe rotate 1 for service maintenance, that kind of stuff. But that's pretty much really the recommendation around how many connectors per group. And then in terms of where you place connectors, it really comes down to minimizing the distance and the latency incurred per hop. So we have our user, our cloud services, the connector on-prem, and as well as those backend applications. So we really want to minimize the latency between there. And we find that placing the connectors as close as possible to your on-prem apps usually has the best impact in reducing the overall latency. So that's just a few tips and general recommendations for connector placement.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Melanie, I've got 2 for you. So first one, back to verifiable credentials. So it's one level to have organizations and other folks understand that level of decentralized identity, but the big key, big value of decentralized identity is really that empowerment of end users to control and manage their own identity. So how do you see, in terms of this evolution, will it be easy for individuals to understand and adopt verifiable credentials?
Yeah, great question. And it is a valid concern, to be honest, because we want to make the experience really easy for people to adopt. And if they're going to be managing their own information, it really needs to be easy. And so that's one of the design principles that we've built into what we've been designing to work with the identity systems you have today. So we do believe it, it does need to be easy for individuals and to incorporate into their daily lives. And as you saw in the demo, Joey's side of the demo where he was the end user, it was really easy for him to just scan a QR code and then accept the credential onto his device, which in this case, he used the Microsoft Authenticator app, which will support the VC standard. And he was able to keep it there and house it there and only share it with people that he wants to share with. And I did see a related question in the chat about sharing that information. And it's going to be different than what we have today in the sense that if you do share that information with an organization, if they do keep a copy of it or if they do access it, you'll be able to see that on your record in the transcript. And so because it's using the distributed ledger technology and the blockchain, you're able to see every single transaction with your data that happens. It's much more secure.
Thank you. And then keep you for one more question. So I know about one of your other passions within the identity world is helping move to a world where we can truly go passwordless, right? Passwords are one of our biggest threats, weaknesses, in the larger enterprises and just generally even users, we can all be empathetic to that. So I just wanted to shout out as well, we're really excited you're joining us here on the roadmap, and we have so much other content that we have to offer both on demand in the Tech Community Video Hub. And I know that one of the on-demand sessions we recorded was about passwordless. So tell me just a thing or two, what are some of the things on the horizon with our passwordless solutions that you're really excited about? And I believe we have some news upcoming of some things we're adding to it as well. So just what are some things that get you excited and jumping out of the bed in the morning about passwordless?
Yeah, I mean, passwordless is really a journey. It's not just one feature, it's a lot of credentials. People have to adopt and use these credentials using biometrics, using their phone app like Authenticator app, different technologies to where that they can prove their identity without having to use a password. And there's so many ways to do that nowadays, and it really comes down to adoption. The thing that we've been working on the most is the administrator experience. And so today, in preview, we have the ability for you to be able to designate who can use password credentials and what kind of credentials so that you have some control over it. But we're continuing to work on different options to allow different types of workers. For example, first-line workers have different tools that they use that information workers don't. They might have shared devices. They might not be able to have the latest Surface Pro. So we're working on different options to meet the different needs of your environment. And we actually just updated our preview to include the API. So now you can incorporate the use of passwordless authentication into your apps. So some really great things to look forward to, and we'll have a lot more to share in the coming months.
Awesome, thank you. All right, question for Jasmine. As you could imagine, app proxy, managing remote access to apps, incredibly top of mind for customers right now. Can individual apps and application proxy be configured for non-authentication so that they're publicly available? And can individual applications be configured with a less secure conditional access policy?
Yeah, so for the first question around just publishing an app via app proxy without authentication, we do have two modes for each app you configure. It's either pass-through mode or pre-authentication mode. We always, of course, recommend pre-authentication mode because it allows you to enforce authentication for every request going to that app. However, if you do have an app where you trust the backend authentication mode, then you can use the pass-through mode there, and that'll just really be kind of a transparent proxy to that app. So that is one option there. And then for the second question around this conditional access policy, basically every time you publish an application with that proxy, it is a separate enterprise application. So in that case, you can then assign whatever specific CA policy you want. You can reuse CA policies you already have, or for a certain app or even a part of an app that you publish as a separate app, you can give that a very granular CA policy that is required for that portion of the app. So you have lots of flexibility there for assigning the policy.
Thank you for that. Bailey or Joey, I'll throw it out there and see who wants to grab this one. B2B, a little bit of love for B2B right now. What do you recommend for doing authentication and event authorization for some cloud apps and that we need to give access to our partners? So maybe some general B2B best practices, but recommendations for doing authentication and event authorization for cloud apps.
Let me see, Joey, I spoke a little bit ago, so if you wanted to take this one.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about B2B. It really depends on your organization. And that's a great call out about it's easy to invite users, but what about specifically authorization? Some of the things to think about is within conditional access, you can control the session, or not this exact session, but you can use conditional access for their sign-in frequency. So what that means is if you're thinking about allowing your organization, a partner organization, access to your resource, you can target them specifically through conditional access. Some other stuff that I've seen other organizations do is limit, like an example would be SharePoint Online. You can limit their access. If you haven't seen what SharePoint Online offers from a capability of limited access, they have the ability to read, but they don't have the ability to download. So they can actually collaborate with, like, an example of a PowerPoint that you're working with them. So they have access to the resources, they just can't download. So that's a form of a DLP protection. But specifically when it comes to authorization, again, and authentication, something that if you haven't looked into it already, ELM, specifically access packages, it's a rather new feature inside the Azure AD suite, but something that I've seen, access packages really help organizations develop a set of applications, groups, SharePoint sites to be able to easily onboard their partners. So an example would be if you're partnering up with another organization for 9 months, you can actually create an access package that will allow them to be onboarded to the application and the groups, the SharePoint sites for 9 months, and then remove access. And then on top of that, you can actually use an access review to launch a access review to ensure that the users still need access to those specific set of applications. But yeah, that's a really good call out about B2B. There's a lot of great stuff that you can do, from conditional access to governance with ELM and access reviews, and still with governance. So that's a great question.
Beautiful, thank you. Bailey, back to security a little bit. So we have the benefit of setting depth based on organizational preference, and a question around the granularity of policies being used today. So do you see typically your customers having a lot of granular conditional access policies or more coarse-grained policies with some exceptions for edge cases?
Granular conditional access policies are exceptions for edge cases. So you're going to want to design, first of all, something quirky about conditional access is by default we allow access. So first of all, just making sure that you lock everything down as like your first kind of blanket move there. And then with more coarse policies, I'm assuming that this is referring to, you know, those general policies to lock everything down, and then more fine-grained to look at those specific business areas, what people need access to and what people need to do to get their work done. So again, if you have very privileged users, ensuring that, you know, if they're high user risk, blocking them completely, or, you know, putting more strict policies in place for them. But then for your everyday users, you know, considering what is appropriate for those users as well. So additionally, for exceptions, those break glass accounts. So in the event that you do need them, you wouldn't want for them to need to MFA or anything like that. So ensuring that your break glass accounts are listed as an exception for everything else.
Perfect, thank you. Jasmine, more about apps. Any best practices you can share for configuring the external URL for remote access?
Yes, so when using App Proxy, as we shared in our demo, it really doesn't take too many steps. What we do is we just require what the internal URL is for your app, so where you typically locally access it from, and we map that to this external URL, and that's the internet-facing endpoint for that app. So that's where users can access it remotely from. And typically, you know, we have two options there. We have the free domain, we have the msappproxy.net domain, and then we also give you the option to customize that domain using a custom domain. So our recommendation is to match your internal URL with the external URL as much as possible. That way, there's several benefits here. Your users don't have to remember a different URL when they're accessing it remotely via App Proxy. It also avoids any link translation problems that might run into the app when it's traversing between redirects and whatnot. So that's really the general best practice, is if you can keep those the same, matching internal and external URLs using custom domains, it'll really make the whole experience a lot more seamless and avoid any app troubleshooting you need to do.
Perfect, thank you. I think, Joey Bailey, this is probably a two-parter that you can take together. How common do you see out in the field are conditional access policies versus using security defaults? And primarily in enforcing MFA, and then thinking from a graph API perspective, what's a good way to get started with CA and APIs?
Yeah, we could split this one in half. So I'll take the first part of that. And your security defaults, so if you are using the Azure AD free version, security defaults are for you, or if you are, you know, not wanting to customize as many things in Azure AD, security defaults are for that audience. But if you're a P1 customer, or especially P2, definitely leverage conditional access to the fullest extent. We have some documentation as well that'll point you to creating those security defaults in conditional access. So we literally have a play-by-play of how to set that up so that you can ensure that you're starting out with conditional access with that same functionality. Also checking out those templates that I showed during the demo, because those will be super helpful for you to just drag and drop them all in, look at them in report only mode, and then flip on what you want. But security defaults aren't going to be for you if you are using a premium version of Azure AD. I would really recommend you switch to using conditional access policy, since it just gives you extra layers of functionality and customization.
And for the other half, specifically with where the APIs and the GUI, it's really up to your preference. But where I've seen APIs really help out organizations is where you have multiple types of conditional access policies. Let's say you have different tiers within an organization, and you have several of applications that you need to include in a specific policy. That's really where the APIs really come into play. Not only that, but also from moving from, let's say, your testing, so your test tenant to your production tenant. If you use the example that we use is a JSON format of file that we showed inside the demo. So we saw was Bailey click, dragged, and dropped. It was just really just a JSON blob that inside of there that defined the conditional access policy. You can actually migrate the conditional access policy that you tested into production. So again, it's really your preference. You can also leverage the PowerShell if you haven't already tapped into the PowerShell. But if you choose between the GUI or the APIs, that's some of the things that I've seen that has helped out several customers in adopting the API versus the GUI.
Thank you. And I think we'll probably just have time for one more. And Melanie, I think we started with decentralized identity, so naturally we're going to end with decentralized identity. In your sense, how mature is decentralized identity? Is it ready for prime time? What do you anticipate the uptake? So just kind of as a DID pro, kind of gut check, where do you see it in terms of its evolution?
Great question. Yeah, I think, this is really the beginning of an evolution in how we manage and control identities, especially for consumers. There's definitely some pressure on the consumer side to gain back that control and gain back that privacy. And, privacy is a human right. And so we should be designing our applications. We should be designing those user experiences to enable that. We talked in our demo about academic credentials, like your transcript or degrees, even trainings that you've completed at work. Those are just one type of data. But I think other types of data, could be anything from your membership in an organization or a program, or licenses, visas, prescriptions, even GitHub code. So we're working with a lot of people in different industries, and we're hoping to kind of help jumpstart this ecosystem. It's going to take people from all sides. It's going to take consumers. It's going to take organizations. And I'm really excited to see it evolve and grow over the next year. And if you're interested, you can go to our website, aka.ms/DID for devs, DIDFORDEVS, in order to check out some of the code and test it yourself. And if you're interested in doing something related to the academic credentials or employee onboarding, definitely feel free to shoot us an email.
Awesome, thank you. That's a great way to close it. I appreciate everybody's time today. I know in this digital event world, it's a little weird. We don't have the booth. We aren't all in Orlando or somewhere else in Louisiana meeting with all of you. So we appreciate you being with us here, making time to listen to our stories around Azure AD and how invested we are. We're really passionate about securing your enterprise and making these tools and services easier for you to use. And we hope you engage with us further in our different Ignite experiences to get all of the great knowledge that we have to share and all of our identity experts that are here today. So there's a handful of ways that we can engage and kind of pretend like we're all together and still get that great best practice training. So first and foremost, I would recommend actually going from bottom up. Check out that aka.ms Identity Ignite 2020 link. Not only will you find a blog that summarizes everything that Joy shared in her session, so it's a good cheat sheet there, but it's also a great summary of the entire identity and access management presence we have here at Ignite. You're here in an Ask the Expert session. Hopefully you just watched the digital breakout that we had before. We have shorter live content for you. We have on-demand content, so we have a ton of stuff. Please check it out, some great things. We understand that 48 hours of this is intense, so you're welcome to bookmark it, backpack it, and watch it later when you have some time. But then we have some other complementary experiences. So we have this virtual hub. This is really a curation of deep technical content that we'd like you to check out. And then to kind of have that booth feel, we have our tech community video hub as part of the larger Microsoft tech community. So that's where some of our on-demand content lives. It will continue to live beyond Ignite, and let's continue the conversation there. But most importantly, follow us at Azure AD Twitter. We're going to have a lot of great content to help you understand and curate the things that are available for you today, surface some information that are landing in a few of these sessions, but also then we can persist the conversation beyond Ignite and further. So great place. If you feel like your question didn't get answered, just at Azure AD handle, and we'll love to take care of it and connect you to some experts that can do so. So with that, I appreciate your time. Please check out our additional sessions. Please be mindful of your digital fatigue, take breaks, go to the connection zone. We have some really cool stuff to watch there too. And thank you. Have a great Microsoft Ignite.